Yeah, man. And just I guess to be a bit formal, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for spending your time with me on this platform, Prison to Promise podcast. And my whole aim with this podcast is to use stories from those of us who've been incarcerated and who have gotten out and who are trying to make a difference, not only in our lives, but in the lives of others, with the hope of motivating other brothers and sisters who are incarcerated or find themselves stuck in cycles that are not conducive to living their fullest potential.
Well, I'm honored. Just knowing your story in terms of you having lived this and faced some of the most difficult challenges with respect to how we take ownership for where we find ourselves. Most of us think that the challenge is external. You know, we always talk about it in terms of the system and in terms of courts and police and policies, and that's an important aspect of it. But when you look at where you ultimately have the greatest responsibility and power for change and transformation, that starts with us.
Yes, sir.
That starts with us. We can never outsource that part of the equation. It just cannot be done, and we expect that change is going to happen in our interest.
Yes, sir.
So you epitomize that to me. And that's why for me it's an honor to be on your show and to participate in these very important conversations.
Well, and I'm humbled to hear that, brother. And I guess I could say simply that, right back at you, because really you epitomize that to me as well, brother, especially considering the little that I know about your history, the things that I read about you, the bio, and seeing some of the snippets of your discussions. You are definitely a picture of transformation. And what I'd like to do today is to tease out some of those jewels from you about what brothers and sisters might be able to do to maybe transform their own lives and to take ownership of their own lives so that they can reach their fullest potential.
Wow, that's well, first of all, let me say, for many of us, the ideal of prison has a very narrow definition. People think prison, they think criminal, they think incarceration, they think people who are obviously deserving of being there, and all those kinds of assumptions. So I'd just like to start by reframing the conversation about prison in the way that I use it in my work, and that is, prison is a metaphor for self-imposed limitations, and freedom is a choice.
Yeah. Say more about that, if you would, brother.
So what happened for me when I went to physical prison, when I finally arrived at a physical prison, when I found myself in prison, incarcerated, what I recognized is I had actually been incarcerated long before I was arrested. And by that, I mean, I discovered that the source of my incarceration wasn't simply the cell. It wasn't the arresting officers, and it certainly wasn't the sentencing judge. That everything it took for me to arrive in that cell had basically been something I had been complicitous in the whole distance. And so I played a part in it, is what I recognized. And before that moment, I never actually thought I played a part in my incarceration. I thought it was something being done to me.
Yeah.
And when I recognized that I was incarcerated before I was arrested, what I'm saying is I recognized my agency in the situation, and I recognized that I had participated in my own incarceration.
Yes,
and
sir.
That was more powerful than any judge, any cell, any prison, any sentence. Okay, so when we talk about what is it that can lead to the transformation, the starting point is having the integrity to take ownership for your complicity, for your participation in the very situation that you oppose and you think is horrible, and all of those things that are, I agree, they're true. I'm not going to argue with any of that. I don't want to have any disagreement about the narrative of a broken system. That's not where I go with this.
Mhm.
I simply say there's something more powerful than the broken system that we have agency over, and with that agency comes accountability.
Yes.
So I'll tell you personally, let me give you a concrete personal example. I went to prison at 17 for a robbery that I committed, and I had done many other things. At 17, I was sentenced as an adult. I was adjudicated as an adult, turned over to the adult prison system, and served 5 years in prison. When I came out, and during that time, it was a very violent period. I was stabbed by Aryan Brotherhood members and committed horrific acts of violence myself. The typical script.
Yeah, and sometimes I'm thinking, you had to do those things just to survive. And it's not even
These
who you wanted
these
to
were
be.
survival, right? These were very practical decisions that I made based on the circumstances I found myself in and the level of consciousness that I had at the time. Please understand, my level of consciousness at the time was highly reactive. So I didn't recognize the power that I had to create new options at that time. I was 17. But ultimately, I was released at 22. And I can just tell you, however bad I was thought to be at 17, by 22, I was a savage.
Yeah, man.
And I went on a crime spree. I had no intentions of being law abiding. And within 3 years, I was rearrested. And at 25, I was facing the rest of my life in prison for robbery. Again, but much more sophisticated. Now, let me just say this. I was sentenced to the maximum sentence of 75 years. And I had the potential opportunity for parole in 15. I looked at my situation and I recognized I wasn't going back to prison because I had made a mistake. I wasn't going back to prison because of a broken criminal justice system. I wasn't even going back to prison because of racism. I want you to be really clear, Dr. Waleed.
Yes, sir.
I was going back to prison because of my choices.
That's what was on the tip of my brain. Choice.
My choice. And this is the hardest thing for many of us who are used to making excuses for our own complicity, for our own poor choices. We hide behind mistakes. Oh, that was a mistake. No, I made a choice.
Yeah, yeah.
It was more than a mistake. It was a choice.
Hmm.
And so when I looked at that, and I'm not saying that I know many innocent people who are incarcerated, but in my case, I was guilty of more than what I went to prison for.
Yes, sir.
So I wasn't a person in there. I wasn't going to whine about being there. I'm not going to shift the focus to the system and its brokenness. I'm not going to deny accountability for what I actually did and how I was thinking and how that shaped even my decision making. And so I realized in prison a simple thing. If someone's sitting in prison today, and I'm not talking about a physical prison, but here's the deal. Turn the cell into a classroom and prison into a university.
Yeah.
Point number one, turn the cell, whatever your cell is, whatever that thing is for you, that limiting challenge and problem in front of you, turn that into your classroom and turn the prison, the broader situation, into a university, an opportunity to find wisdom in it. Mm-hmm. And let that be your guide through the difficulty so that you don't end up continuously in a wounded state. Because victimhood is about woundedness.
Yeah. And
it's about that we don't have control over that. We don't have control over it. We feel that we don't. And so And given that there is a part that we are not in control of, the singular focus that I had was, well, what part do I have control over? And what would that look like if I exercised it fully?
Yeah.
What would that look like?
Yeah.
And I found out listen, I ended up in the same prison that Malcolm Little became Malcolm X. I earned my amount at MCI Norfolk Prison Colony. I earned my bachelor's and master's degree from Boston University while there, the same institution that Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. earned his doctorate.
Yeah, I saw that you identified yourself as a scholar in residence.
Scholar in residence.
Right on, right on.
Because we get to define our experience.
Yes, we do.
In terms of how I experience this situation, that is my responsibility. I can't outsource that.
But let me ask you this, Brother Khalil. For those brothers and sisters who are in these types of situations, who may not have these insights that you're sharing, and they don't understand what their choices are, or they only see a limitation to their choices, and all of them lead to dead ends or points of depravity. How do they get to that point where they can begin to see clearly and understand that I have much greater choices than what's in front of me?
One of the things that we always ask people to be reflective about is to ask yourself, what is one word that I would say best describes me? So at a very practical level, I have to first start with self-perception, because my core kind of position is that all power starts from self-perception. All power starts from self-perception. So operating from that premise, my first question is, how would I describe me? What is the best way that I would describe me? What is one word that would best describe me? Now, let me just tell you about doing this exercise. I have done this exercise on death row, in prison, with people who will never leave. And every single time when I ask them one word that best describes them, it is words like joyful, kind, generous, intelligent, thoughtful, mindful, forgiving, merciful, wanting to be like God, wishing I had been more forgiving. These are the kinds of things that people say at the bottom of life.
Attributes.
Because it's always the attributes. It's always the attributes of goodness when you ask people their best. And here's what I will say to you: no matter how horrible your circumstances, if asked to share the best that you are aware of it. It is immediate. It is in your DNA. It is clocked into the very fiber of the thing you call life. So I start from that place. It doesn't matter how high up or how low down you find yourself. That's foundational. Because what you say from there, what you declare from that point, is what you shape and what you give shape to regarding your world, the world that you define as yours.
That's that core, and that's what you can build upon.
Absolutely. In religion, we sometimes call it the great I am. But that core principle is clocked into our DNA. It is a question that each human being at some point will ask themselves, even if not instructed.
This is true. Or they'll acknowledge it, or they'll reflect on it.
They will be, absolutely. It's embedded in the DNA of the human experience. So I don't have to do anything in that regard with respect to the work that I'm talking about. This is something that is an inevitable part of our experience called life. And some of us come to those questions sooner than others, or on different paths than others. But the connector is our humanity, our shared humanity, not our experience.
Right.
See, we get locked into the experience rather than our shared humanity. And when I say shared humanity, it is that we are multi-experiential. And so understanding that, we sometimes have irrevocable or irreconcilable experiences. We can have irreconcilable experiences.
Absolutely.
And consequently, this is where most people become most tribal.
I like
because
how you
they
put
arrive
tribal.
at that, they get stuck. Yeah, they get stuck in their
separated.
tribe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Separated. Instead of realizing the oneness of all of us, that
The
one
common
humanity.
denominator. That's right. The common denominator is so much bigger than the tribe. It's like someone saying I'm an individual. And what I would simply say is, you have the luxury of being an individual because you are part of a social group. You are part of a social reality, a communal reality. You cannot exist in isolation. So if we understand that we value our individual expression in a very different way, we value it in the context of, like Maya Angelou said, nothing human is foreign to me. Nothing human is foreign to me.
That's heavy, bro.
So I'm talking about something so much bigger than race.
Yeah.
I'm talking about something so much bigger than gender.
That's all that external stuff.
Or political label, or party, or ideology.
Experience. Yeah.
Or even your direct experience. It's valued, I appreciate it, and I think it's critical in terms of how we come to understand ourselves. But there's something bigger at work, much bigger at work. And it's important for us to take time to be reflective about that, so that it helps inform the kinds of decisions we make. And recognize that this incredible agency called being human, not the individual, the agency of being human, is so powerful that we actually can use that to bridge every divide that has come between us.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm digging that 100%. And when we bridge those divides, that's when we begin to realize the oneness, the uniqueness, the unification of, I guess, everyone for that matter. And there's really no separation. But if I could just go back just a little bit, because I think one of the things, or a couple of things that you dropped really resonated with me. And the one was about choice, making choice, making decisions, and informing our decisions. And that information coming from reflecting on the goodness of that which I come from, of which all of us come from. And I think that when we can reflect on that, yeah, we make better decisions, and those decisions ultimately can create a new life, a new reality for us.
Listen, brother, after being in prison for 20 years, and when I told you I did a lot of stuff during that period, I also became pen pals with Makaziwe Mandela, the eldest daughter of Nelson Mandela, who was attending UMass Amherst, University of Massachusetts Amherst, on a Fulbright scholarship.
Yeah.
I was attending Boston University inside the prison in Massachusetts. So I wrote her because Nelson Mandela had been so much of an influence in my life in terms of giving me vision that I actually could be so much more, even from a cell, because I have concrete evidence that here's somebody in a cell in South Africa.
Yeah.
And we're celebrating.
Yeah.
So I know I can do something here in America with all the opportunity I got with school and all that. So I wrote her. We became pen pals. And in 1986, I wrote her and her father, Nelson Mandela was at Poolsmoor Prison in South Africa at the time. I made a commitment to her and her father that once I was released from prison in America, that I would move to South Africa and work in schools and prisons and with companies that hire returning citizens to honor his contribution to me and many like me at the bottom of life in America. That was 1986, brother.
Yeah, brother.
He got out before me. April 11th, 1990. I got out March 1st, 1999. I was 40 years old, brother. Not much was expected of me. I can just tell you that.
Right on.
Let me just say this. I went on to do great work, but ultimately I moved to South Africa. 25 years later, I arrived in South Africa on a sister city project between New Orleans and Johannesburg with jazz artists, Wynton Marsalis, John Batiste, several artists.
Those some heavyweights there.
Oh yeah, you can't make such a thing up.
Right.
We went there because of a friend of mine, Damon Batiste, famous jazz family in New Orleans, was doing this, leading this initiative. We got there and I remembered that I was actually there not for that project, but because I made a commitment 25 years earlier at the bottom of life in a prison cell. And here's what happened. I ended up meeting Makaziwe at a grocery store randomly.
Oh, wow.
And I looked at her, I said, Makaziwe. And she didn't know me. We were pen pals. We never physically met.
Never saw each other.
Never saw each other. But I knew her because she's in the news. She's world famous. So I looked at her, I said, Makaziwe. And she took a step back and she said, well, who wants to know? I said, Khalil. And she looked at me, she leaned and she said, Khalil Osiris from prison in America. I said, now free in South Africa.
Oh, brother, my eyes are tearing up just hearing this story. Wow.
I'm telling you, brother, we hugged. She said, she talked about how God has had me on her heart. This happened 5 more times, and finally we got together. She said, I need to know what you're doing in my country. The short story is this, brother. I'm now senior advisor for the House of Mandela. Makaziwe Mandela, Dr. Makaziwe Mandela in the House of Mandela. She has a book coming out in October 5th about her story and her father and a whole lot of other things. I'm going to be bringing it to America.
Nice. And
introducing it. And I definitely will bring it to your show, and we'll do everything we can to get some kind of interview or something with you, brother, because of the work you're doing.
Oh, brother, that sounds beautiful, brother. That sounds beautiful. But more than anything, I want to be able to highlight the work that you're doing. And so if you would, brother, tell the listeners what you're doing today. What kind of work are you doing right now?
Okay, well, we have a major initiative underway that's focused on second chances, the benefits of hiring returning citizens. And this particular project is we are inviting people to share their stories through an eBook series. And what my organization, Truth and Reconciliation Conversations, TRC, a nonprofit organization where we're going to focus on creating this eBook series, telling these stories of second chances, and creating a new narrative around what can happen when you match people who take accountability for their choices and act with integrity, and employers who have a vision for making a difference and being inclusive and holding themselves accountable on their side to change communities as well as change lives. So this initiative, people can find out about it by going to my LinkedIn page, Khalil Osiris, or my our webpage at trconversations.com and get more information. But this is a very important initiative that we're doing to capture these stories of people who are operating with such extraordinary resilience and excellence in the face of adversity that we're so busy looking at the negatives, we're so busy looking at the failures, that we overlook the multitude, the wealth of successes in plain sight.
Successes, intelligence, abilities,
everywhere. We're in abundance. And so I've been saying with second chance employment, there are those of us who have this experience who ought to be looked at as subject matter experts in second chance employment.
Yes, sir.
And so rather than go around with a bullhorn screaming it, I'm just going to demonstrate it. I'm going to show the stories in this ebook series of the most exceptional and extraordinary narratives you can imagine. And then I'm going to show you how normalized they are when you look differently at the situation. So this is a very big initiative. We're inviting people who are returning citizens, who are currently incarcerated or justice impacted. We want to hear your stories, and we're going to turn them into ebooks, and then you will get a final PDF version of the ebook for yourself, and it's at no cost to any person we select for this process. It's absolutely free. You just have to tell your story.
That's awesome.
So
and
that's our starting product.
That's dope, man. And it sounds like an opportunity also to help empower those of us who've been impacted by the system and who don't think they can make a difference in the world, or who are struggling to find their way.
Imagine this. Imagine when we do their ebooks, and we've got a model, a template for how they do it. Like, we're not leaving them to their own devices. We even have a template called Second Chances, the benefits of hiring returning citizens, which I already created. And think about it like this. One part of it is that we've created a Second Chances employment training program that's based on the book and the narrative. Any person who completes it will be able to create their own ebook and use that as something superior to a resume to send out to employers who are second chance employers, to show them the length that they have gone to prepare themselves for this opportunity. Additionally, they're able to send it to schools that they failed at before incarceration, and now that they've turned their lives around, send it to that school and say, I'd like to come and share my story, and here's my voice, and begin to change the narrative in a tangible, positive way, using the most cutting edge current new technology. Imagine that.
Yeah.
So you become a public speaker, you become a professional presenter, because you're going to go through a process where you learn exactly what it takes. And lastly, which is most importantly, you're going to hold yourself accountable for how you exercise this option, this opportunity, and share it with others. Because once you tell your story, you're on full blast.
That's right.
Everybody sees you. So it has many functions in terms of why we're doing this, to help people move their stories along and get this narrative out and begin to change the dynamic of how we see ourselves and what's possible. And this is technology that we're going, again, our organization is using this technology in a very innovative, civic-oriented way. We want to increase civic engagement for people who historically have been at the periphery, people who historically just haven't participated. And I'll just leave you with this other point about this in terms of where it's going. You hear so many of us who have been incarcerated around voting time, around the political season, we begin to say how distraught we are that we can't vote. Now, here's what both of us would know. Most of us who are returning citizens or justice impacted, we didn't vote before we lost the vote. Most of us, when we're truth telling, when we're just telling the truth, we didn't vote before we lost the vote. We didn't get upset about the vote until we realized it was something taken from us.
Yeah. And
we didn't have any intention of participating in the vote. Now, it's because voting is not just something that you do once off. Voting is part of a cultural experience. And many of us have not participated in that cultural dynamic. That's the truth. Yeah. The majority of guys I knew in prison had never voted.
And didn't care to vote.
And it did not matter to them in the least. So in order to begin to change that in a way that's sustainable, and that is transformational, we have to begin to have a whole new level of education about why it's important. And we're going to be using these eBooks to tell that story. Mm-hmm. We're going to be using these eBooks to connect with organizations that are focused on the vote. We'd like, in fact, and I'm saying this as a setup to say to you, brother, I'd like to make sure we do an eBook on what you're doing so that we can get more people to hear, see, and know about your story by digitizing it in this way. And then I'm saying to you, create a template out of what you have so that we can show other young men how to do a podcast like you're doing it through your book, teach them, and provide them with a way to begin to launch that themselves and focus on seeing themselves as advocates, ambassadors, and spokespersons for good.
Yes, sir.
So I'm telling you up front, I'm going to make sure you have a free ebook with your story so that we can get more people understanding and seeing how to become part of this positive narrative of change.
Right on, brother. And so whenever that opportunity presents itself, or whenever the time is right, I'm on board, because this is really about trying to empower and inform our people so that, again, they can be the best versions of themselves. And so I'm moved beyond words by your narrative, by your story, and by the focus that you have on helping to continue to change the narrative of how society sees those of us who have been just as impacted, and how we see ourselves, and I think that at the end of the day, it's so important for us to have a new vision of who we are and what our potentials are, and not just that dude or that chick or that whatever person we thought that we were that led us to prison. So I really appreciate that, brother, and I think that that's what's going to really change the tide for us.
Well, I appreciate you, brother. I'm just grateful for the work that you're doing, and I know that the more of us who have an opportunity to have these kinds of conversations, the more we will begin to change our thinking. Look, in prison, I knew a lot of guys would not pick up some big book and read. Mm-hmm. But what I also knew is that we come from oral traditions, and so understanding that, I saw prison very much like universities. Likewise. The primary activity of any prison is the exchange of ideas. This is why we believe that people who go to prison will learn to be more criminal, because there's an exchange of ideas happening. Mm-hmm. So my recognition of that led me to begin to introduce ideas that were disruptive to the narrative. So I created a book. I wrote a book called The Psychology of Incarceration while I was in prison.
Where can people find that book?
You can find it online, and I can make sure that people get it. It's in over 90 prisons around the country. The curriculum, it's taught at universities. And that's where I was telling you earlier that the premise of the book is prison is a metaphor for self-imposed limitations and freedom is a choice. But what we do in that model is we provide people with a simple example of how we ask them to simply answer straightforward questions if faced with the kinds of circumstances that are defined as incarceration. What would they do? And anytime you find people who respond overwhelmingly based on external locus of control or externalized circumstances, which is their environment, their situation, their immediate circumstances, then what we showed them, the alternative to that is to operate from the internal locus of control. It's to operate from internal factors called principles, values, and the very things that you say you build your life and identity on. So we asked you, what is it that is the best that you are from the beginning? Mm-hmm. Because then you declare a positive value. You declare the most positive aspect of your ethics and your declaration of your I amness.
And that's where I build from.
That's where you build from. Now, Anything less than that is a distortion, brother.
Yes, indeed. And for the most part, brother, anything that we've engaged in that led us to prison or into depression or whatever is a distortion.
It's a distortion.
Yeah, and it
It
has
is a
impeded us from
distortion.
understanding ourselves.
And this is all we say to them in the psychology of incarceration. So I wrote that book, and it's now in over 90 prisons around the country. Mm-hmm. Since I've been released, it's turned into an 8-part DVD series, which is promoted by an organization company called FMS Productions, which is online. All they have to do is Google Psychology of Incarceration, Khalil Osiris, or my name, Psychology of Incarceration. It'll come up immediately. They don't even have to search for it.
Right on. So Brother Khalil, well, go ahead.
No, go.
I was going to tell you, we're down about 2 minutes left with our time together. You know, I'm enjoying this conversation, and I'm looking forward to staying in touch with you, man. You know, and we don't have to record the next time we talk either, man.
Yes, sir.
You know, but one of the things I want to ask within these last 2 minutes is, gee, it slipped my mind just that quick, man. But yeah, one of the last things I want to ask is, what would be some food for thought you'd leave with a young brother or sister coming out of prison?
The most important quality for us to focus on is our ability to be absolutely honest with ourselves. Absolutely honest with ourselves as a starting point for any interaction we have with another human being or a situation or anything that we think we want. Make first a commitment to be absolutely honest with yourself. And that requires integrity to sustain, because there's going to be so many situations that glitter when you first get out. They're just going to be shiny objects out there. It'll be maybe be a partner or a spouse. It may be whatever it is. I'm just saying, find at a foundational level a way to be completely honest with yourself and make a commitment to operate with the integrity to do the things that align with the best that you say you are. The best.
Peace, brother. And with that, I'm going to call it a wrap, brother, because we're right at the end of our time together. I'll be reaching out to you, brother. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, brother. It's an honor.
Thank you, brother. Peace.